In 1928, a burglary at a Connecticut home led to the arrest of a drifter. What police initially dismissed as a petty crime would soon unravel into one of the most chilling criminal confessions in American history. The man in custody gave a false name. He'd done this before, dozens of times across decades. But this time, a young prison guard would convince him to tell the truth. All of it. His real name was Carl Panzram, and the confession he would write, spanning decades of criminal activity across multiple continents, would become one of the most disturbing documents in criminal history. Carl Panzram was born on June 28, 1891, on a small farm in Warren, Minnesota. He was one of several children in a family of Prussian immigrants struggling to survive on the unforgiving prairie. His father abandoned the family when Carl was young. Poverty was constant. By his own later account, Panzram described his childhood as defined by deprivation, isolation, and a growing sense of rage toward the world. At age 11, Panzram was sent to the Minnesota State Training School in Red Wing. The institution, meant for reform, was later documented as a place of systemic abuse. Panzram would describe the experience as the turning point of his life. What happened to Panzram inside those walls is well documented in historical records. He reportedly endured severe institutional abuse, physical and otherwise. He later wrote that the boy who entered Red Wing was not the same person who left. By his teenage years, Panzram had become a transient. He rode freight trains, drifted between cities, and accumulated arrests for theft and vagrancy. He was incarcerated repeatedly, in jails, workhouses, and military prisons. Psychologists who later reviewed his case described Panzram as possessing an unusually high intelligence paired with a complete absence of empathy. He was methodical, articulate, and consumed by an all-encompassing nihilism that defined everything he did. Panzram's criminal career spanned from approximately 1906 to 1928, more than 2 decades. Investigators would eventually connect him to burglaries, arsons, and a staggering number of serious offenses committed across the United States, Europe, and Africa. In his written confession, Panzram claimed to have burglarized the home of former President William Howard Taft in 1920. He reportedly used the stolen funds to purchase a small yacht, which he used to lure victims. According to his own account, Panzram traveled to West Africa, specifically Portuguese Angola, in the early 1920s. He claimed that multiple victims lost their lives during this period. These claims remain difficult to independently verify. Back in the United States, investigators would later learn Panzram had operated across multiple states, from New York to Oregon, from Connecticut to Kansas. His pattern was one of constant movement, making detection nearly impossible. Panzram confessed to taking the lives of 21 people in total. While investigators were able to confirm several of these claims, the full extent of his crimes has never been conclusively established. What made Panzram particularly difficult to track was his use of aliases. He operated under dozens of false names, including Jeff Rhodes, John O'Leary, and Jack Allen. Each identity left a fragmented trail across jurisdictions. In 1928, Panzram was working under a false name in the Baltimore area. He committed a string of burglaries and at least one confirmed homicide, the case that would ultimately end his freedom forever. The victim in this final case was identified as Alexander Usaka, a fellow drifter. Investigators discovered the crime and connected it to the man they had recently arrested for burglary. The walls were finally closing in. The investigation that would finally bring Panzram to account began not with a detective, but with a prison guard. Henry Lesser, a young officer at the Washington, D.C. jail, noticed something unusual about the new inmate. Lesser reportedly showed Panzram small acts of kindness, bringing him writing materials, speaking to him with basic human decency. In response, Panzram began to write. What emerged was a detailed autobiography and confession. Over weeks and months, Panzram filled page after page. His confession detailed crimes spanning 20 years across multiple countries. He wrote with chilling clarity, dates, locations, methods. Investigators had never seen anything like it. Law enforcement officials began the painstaking work of cross-referencing Panzram's claims with unsolved cases. Several of his confessions matched open investigations. Locations, timelines, and circumstances aligned with known evidence. The challenge for investigators was jurisdictional. Panzram had committed crimes in dozens of states and multiple countries. No single agency had the full picture. His constant movement had been his greatest shield. What investigators found most unsettling was Panzram's psychological profile. He expressed no remorse. He offered no excuses. He simply stated what he had done with a detachment that forensic psychologists described as profoundly antisocial. The case against Panzram was built primarily on his own detailed confessions, corroborated by physical evidence and witness accounts where available. Prosecutors focused on the most provable charges, the ones with the strongest evidence. Panzram was initially arrested for the burglary in Washington, D.C. While incarcerated, the weight of his confessions to Henry Lesser brought federal attention. Authorities realized they were dealing with something far beyond petty crime. Panzram was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison and transferred to Leavenworth Penitentiary in Kansas, one of the most secure facilities in the country. He made no attempt to deny his past. Inside Leavenworth, Panzram was classified as the most dangerous inmate in the facility. He openly stated that he would harm anyone who crossed his path. Prison officials took these threats with absolute seriousness. In June 1929, Panzram took the life of a civilian employee at Leavenworth, a laundry foreman named Robert Warnke. This crime, committed within federal jurisdiction, carried the possibility of capital punishment. When questioned about the incident, Panzram didn't deny it. According to official records, he stated plainly that he had done it and expressed no regret. He reportedly told investigators he wished he could have done more. Federal prosecutors now had a clear, provable case within their own jurisdiction. The confession was unambiguous. The evidence was overwhelming. Carl Panzram would finally face the full weight of the law. Carl Panzram stood trial for the murder of Robert Warnke in federal court. The proceedings were swift. Panzram refused to mount a defense and reportedly told his own attorneys not to bother trying to save him. The jury deliberated for a matter of minutes. Carl Panzram was found guilty and sentenced to death by hanging. Upon hearing the verdict, Panzram reportedly expressed satisfaction with the outcome. Anti-capital punishment organizations attempted to intervene, filing appeals on Panzram's behalf. He was furious. He reportedly wrote letters demanding that the group stop their efforts, insisting that he wanted the sentence carried out. Henry Lesser, the guard who had first earned Panzram's trust, made efforts to preserve the written confession. He believed the document had value as a psychological and historical record, even as authorities showed little interest in it. On September 5, 1930, Carl Panzram was executed at Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary. He was 39 years old. According to witnesses, he showed no fear and offered no final words of remorse. His last recorded words to the executioner were defiant and profane, a final act of contempt toward a world he had openly declared war against for most of his life. For decades after his execution, Panzram's confession remained unpublished. Henry Lesser spent years trying to find a publisher willing to print it. The manuscript was repeatedly rejected as too disturbing for public consumption. In 1970, the confession was finally published under the title Killer, a Journal of Murder. The book forced a public reckoning with questions about institutional abuse, criminal psychology, and the making of a criminal mind. Criminologists and psychologists have studied Panzram's case extensively. Many point to the catastrophic failures of the institutions meant to reform him, arguing that systemic abuse created a feedback loop of rage and destruction. The victims of Carl Panzram, many of them unnamed, some unconfirmed, represent lives cut short by a man the system failed to stop for over 20 years. Their stories are largely lost to history, which is itself an injustice. The case of Carl Panzram remains a landmark study in how institutional cruelty, untreated trauma, and systemic neglect can converge to produce catastrophic outcomes. His story is not a justification, it is a warning. Carl Panzram spent more years of his life inside institutions than outside them. Not one of those institutions stopped him. Every single one made him worse. A new case drops every day. Subscribe so you never miss one.